Okay, when I start a page, I usually have an idea of what I want to convey visually. And the first thing I do is to divide the page in the frames that it's going to have. The other thing is to establish the rhythm of the page, meaning sort of like the design or the layout that is going to help leading the eye of the viewer, the reader. So the story here, just so you know, we're going to have two astronauts ejecting from the cockpit of a jet fighter. And in the last frame, we'll see the payoff to what's going on. It's kind of like we're trying to narrate a little short story in 3 frames. So we'll start designing the cockpit, and we're going to have a medium close-up on the first frame. So we have the glass. We're going to use the glass of the edge of the glass of the cockpit as our main design element to begin this. So then, to follow that line, we're going to use the smoke of the trail of smoke of the jet fighter that we're going to have coming foreshortened towards the foreground. By the way, I've been using this type of pencil for about 20 years now, and one of the reasons I like it so much is because I don't have to do this. Whenever I run out of a point, I just shake it, and it helps a lot. So we have the 2 astronauts ejecting. We'll just do it simple for now. The main thing right now is not the details about the overall design of the page, which, if it's true, yes, it's true that we're dealing with individual frames. The whole thing has to work as a whole as well. And they're fighting this gigantic robot type creature in the back. Again, right now it's all loose, and let's add the main guy, the main astronaut, in his seat. His arm. He's grabbing the controls, and he's looking. This is what we're gonna do here is a sort of stealth bomber. And the main guy, the main pilot, obviously is in the cockpit, is ejecting from the cockpit. The other one is going to be in a section on the side of the jet fighter. It's similar to those turrets that you would see on World War II bombers, like the B-29 and all those airplanes. So he's ejecting from there. One interesting thing is this is a small, right? Is to frame things within the frame. In this case, we're framing the machine gun pilot within the airplane and the smoke. So he's in this area. Here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna frame the other guy that is behind the machine gun within the space where the main cockpit is. So we see his machine gun protruding from the cockpit. So again, we're trying to establish a rhythm here. We start like this, then we have this line going down, then we have the smoke, the trail with all the debris coming from the jet fighter coming in this direction, some of the lines from the robot, what ultimately, well, now it looks like, doesn't look like anything, but it will look like a robot. Some of them, you know, are parallel to the wing, and they go down like the wings, and again, the wings are directing our eye towards the last frame. On the last frame, what we see is that all this action is taken in the imagination of a kid that is playing in a backyard. So he's gonna be sitting on the grass, and he's holding two toys. One is a robot, and the other one is a jet fighter. And again, I'm going to try to mirror some of these lines that I established before. Like, for example, this line is a curvilinear line in the beginning, and then here we're going to try to do something similar, but it's a roof of the kitchen, the section we see from the kitchen. We're looking at the kitchen from outside, and this is all glass, and mom is coming through the sliding door, yelling, "Hey, time to come in, you need to get some lunch." The two men that ejected, they are coming down in parachutes. So we're gonna have one bigger here in the foreground. You don't see the parachute, but we see him, and with the course of the parachute. And one smaller here, where we see the whole thing. We see the parachute, and the astronaut. There's a kid's bicycle, BMX bicycle in the back. Maybe we can have a barbecue, or a section of a barbecue closer to him. Another important element when designing a comic book page is to keep in mind, and I know this is hard, but at least it is for me, you know, one gets into the groove of drawing and forgets about this, is a space for the dialogue, for the balloons, you know. So, you know, we could have some there, you know, some here. And the way I thought about this was to have maybe having a exchange of words between the two astronauts. You know, this one probably saying, "Commander, it's time to eject, okay, roger that." And we keep the dialogue going down this way and this way. Here we can have another piece of dialogue, you know, coming from this astronaut. And here we can have something that maybe the robot is saying. One thing I like a lot is the way Ken Brusenack did with Howard Chaykin when they did American Flag. And they did something very interesting and very innovative back in the 80s, which was to use different fonts for the dialogue. And these fonts would be directly correlated to what was going on in the story. Like, for example, they had a robot. It was a font that, you know, looked mechanical, you know, and it was great because all of a sudden it added the element of the sound to a comic book, which it doesn't have, but it happened in your head, you know. So I thought about trying to do the same thing here, where you will have a specific type of font coming from the astronauts, like maybe some kind of like techno-looking like font, and the robot will be something more menacing, okay? And then on the last frame, we continue that rhythm that we have with the balloons, only that the dialogue of the last astronaut, he probably could say that, landing safe or something like that. And then the kid says, "Yeah, Mom, I heard you." And this font could merge into the font of the kid. And the font of the robot just stop doing that, you know, and could merge probably into the font of the mom. So now we're just going to refine the details just a little bit more. So then we can put this, again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a piece of paper on top of it, and I'm going to proceed with the actual penciling of this. This is just a rough layout. Okay, so we're going to block in some shade areas, some blacks, you know. astronaut, we're gonna put some dark areas on the side controls of the cockpit. And let me define the front panel a little better. Smoke definitely plays an important part. The debris coming out. Let's frame mom within a dark area there. Find a little bit of a parachute. Also, something important is to keep in mind if this is going to be printed in black and white or in color. In this case, it's going to be colored, and we should leave open stuff, for the color. Maybe it's, like, for example, if I knew that this was going to print in black and white, I would establish a shadow here of the kid, But because I know that it's going to be done in color, I would rather have something that is a little lighter in value and not so dark. This is a trail where the guy's ejecting. So the main pilot. This thing, the eraser, electric eraser, is a tool that I adopted while I was in at Art Center. It's very useful, and I like it, particularly when I do storyboards. The reason I like it is because you can draw with it, meaning that, stuff like this, that you can cover it with black, and then it's almost like you're using the electric eraser as a painting tool. You get certain textures and things that they just look different. That if you had drawn them with a pencil, and it looks more interesting. It adds a little more dimension depending on what you're drawing, and all obviously because of the how precise it can be. Like if I had to, let's say that I had to define that edge, and I had these even with this eraser, the only way I would have to manage the same results would be to cut it with an X-Acto knife, and that's something I do too, depending on the result that I'm after. But you saw me doing that. This is much easier and faster and more precise. So basically, this is the rough is almost done. We established here our main layout, the rhythm of the page, the story. I think I will have some interesting things here that I wasn't planning for, but they're happy accidents. Like for example, the trail so that the astronauts leave when they eject, create this sort of arrow that leads directly into the boy, which he's on a kind of like a triangular pose or configuration also, and all makes for a nice rhythm, you know. And what now we should proceed and go ahead with the penciling. So this is what I did. What I did was to blow up the layout I had, and I'm putting it behind a clean piece of paper, and I'm gonna start penciling, you know. So where you add, now is the time to add all the detail and really defining the drawing. And one thing I'm gonna try to do is to take it as far as possible. You know, I know that usually when artists ink their own stuff, it's logical, you know, to leave some of the stuff very open, because then you define it with the inking. So it saves a lot of time. However, one thing I learned, and I realized that it's true. Back when I was working with Neil Adams on my the first time, you know, when I started doing comics, Neil told me something very, very valuable. The more time you spend with the penciling process, the better the inks will be, because you don't have to worry about drawing, but the quality of the line. So you can embellish it and, you know, take it even farther on that face. I'm going to start by defining the frames. One thing I use a lot is stencils. Particularly when I'm doing mechanical stuff like machines or anything that is non-organic, I love to use these stencils. They've been with me for a long time. I had these for like 20 years and they're still running. So let's find the edge of the cockpit with one of them. Find my rim light. Let's go to the astronaut. Now, one thing I like to do is to keep a piece of paper moving around. So, you know, when this starts getting busy, I'm not running my hand on top of it, and and therefore getting, you know, smudges and that type of deal. The other reason is because I like to keep a sharper point, and I know that this is a sharp point already, being thin and all, but by doing this, you get this. If you can blow the point, that's what you get, you know. So you can really work the details. in a really more precise way. So we're defining the pilot, and I will try to put as much drama or expression into his face, even though it's a tiny face that we have within that big helmet. Where he's yelling to the gunner that it's time to eject. We see a little bit of what the Apollo mission astronauts call the Snoopy hat with the communication gear. So now I'm going to define a little better the eject mechanism. Again, I'm adding a few details here that were not in the rough, but they help tell the story. We see smoke and pieces of debris coming out from the fuselage. So we're working on the exhaust pipes or afterburn structures of the jet. These repeated lines is a pattern that I've noticed on the same things, on the afterburns of the space shuttle and the Saturn V rocket. So here we're trying to mix a little bit the technology, old technology, new technology, or pseudo new technology. This is part of the forearm / gun that the robot has. Again, various geometric lines. You'll see that, the more you do this, like everything, the more you do it, the easier it gets, One thing that helps is to get reference. Always get reference constantly. And things that are different. You for example, the head of that robot. It could be a cross between a Volkswagen Beetle and the head of the general at the end of Return of the Jedi, the calamari head-like general, and that's what reference does for you. It gives you the good thing with reference is that it allows for the work to give you a present, basically, to reward you, and I'm saying that because you come up with ideas when looking at reference that there's no way you could come up with if you hadn't looked at that image before, particularly if it was something that you were not familiar with. These stencils, also, the more you use them, the more, the easier it's going to be for you. And I'm saying that because of the different sizes. The gears definitely, it's something that I always use, the ellipse stencils, because basically they look more solid, and if I were working on organic stuff, I would do it by hand. But whenever I'm working on tech, like we used to call it back in the 90s, I like to use stencils. It makes the whole thing more solid, and looks more like machinery, basically. The smoke, I know that before we talked about doing the whole thing with this thick smoke structure, particularly since it's a jet that has been hurt, and usually the smoke that comes out is really thick. But here probably will be a good idea to define that with the color, to do a more clean line, which will make things less clutter. Guys ejecting. Both of them actually are ejecting of the ship. We do the first explosion, sort of, and then the trace of them going up. Contrail, I think it's called. you can see there behind him the seat and him grabbing those handlebars. Here these are rockets, booster rockets on the side of the seat to help eject. Now we're working on the tree, on the third frame, a little bit of a background. Again, you can suggest texture, but you don't need to go too crazy since you're gonna be inking yourself. Again, whatever you establish on the layout, you every time you go into the next step, pencil or inking, you always try to aim at what you were thinking about in the very beginning, and that has to do with the rhythm of the page and where you want the reader to be looking at. Basically, that's little things like nothing is done just by chance. You see the hands, they're in an angle that points in. Same deal with that tree. This is pretty simple. It's just a kid, wearing the clothing any 10-year-old kid would wear. Jeans, t-shirt, sneakers. We're gonna help later, establish textures and whatnot about the clothing. I'm gonna talk about that later. We are working on the landing action figure, right? He's coming down in a parachute, and you notice that the guy is wearing this armor or pseudo armor, which could be any material, could be plastic, could be metal, and that's something that you can certainly suggest, with the different type of line that you are doing. And like you see there, even though we're working on an armor and it's a big metal plate, you can always suggest anatomy. That will always help, for the image to look more real, to resonate, and it will look more ergonomical also. Now we're doing the robot. The kid in one hand, he's got the jet, and on the other hand, he's got the evil robot. And we realize that everything is being orchestrated on the mind, on the imagination of this 10-year-old kid. The robot kind of has the same pose that we saw on the second frame. It's just a way to bridge the two images, We establish a little bit of the grass here. You'll notice that I'm drawing the grass indication or leaves in perspective, meaning that if you could trace a line between the little bits of grass that will be closer to the edge of the frame and the little bits of grass that are closer to the horizon line in the back, you would see that these bits of grass are going into a vanishing point. You're establishing that depth of field. This is some glass reflections. Again, very simple technique that you can use to suggest glass reflection. More Kirby dots, debris coming out. You probably notice on these images from space, whenever the satellites separate from the Soyuz capsules, you'll see a lot of debris coming out. Here you're just giving yourself a guide, of where you want to put your thick blacks eventually. Of course, nothing is written on stone, but the more you do on the pencil, the better. Here we're following the form, even though we have plastic or metal on the spacesuit, you have those lines going across the form, and that helps define the form better. Here I'm laying a little bit of black areas within the plume of smoke that is coming off the jet. Chances are is that here, when we do the inking process, we're gonna leave a lot of wide open little areas on that arm with the weapon that you can see now. But at least with the blacks, we have a good guide, So what I'm doing right now is kind of like roughing out the plain black areas, and doesn't particularly mean that I will have that on the ink page, but I would rather see if it works now than if I had inked and then I'm not happy with the results, So the smoke, for example, I know that when I did the layout, I established that as being thick and with a lot of blacks, but I think that I'm going to leave that for the color. I'm just going to do the outline, because one thing that I didn't do on the layout and that I was happy with the penciling is all the line quality. It's very organic versus all this mechanical stuff that is going on here. Besides, even if I don't add these blacks, like here in the smoke and in the parachute, that's going to help to the color, because it's going to be a good guide for the color. Okay.